Okay, let me introduce myself and my colleague here, Rob. I'm Tom Steffen. I'm at the School of Intercultural Studies here. This is my 20th year here. Our field work was in the Philippines. We were there for 15 years. Went there when they declared martial law and left after the revolution. So they're the people power movement that took place there. My interest in business mission has been quite interesting. I teach the church planning track here for our School of Intercultural Studies. And one of the parts that we cover in there is the delivery system of how do you plant churches and in what manner do you do that. And so business as mission, of course, is one of those ways that happens. And so I linked up with Global Opportunities way back there, and then I came across Steve Rundle, who is at the School of Business here, and had him come in every time we covered that, business as mission and planting churches, tying the two together. And from that, you know, we were doing that for a number of years, and I said, you know, Steve, we ought to write a book on that sometime. And never thought any more about it, let it go, went through a couple more years, and Steve emailed me, called me up, I don't forget which one. Come over to my office, I got an interesting thing I want to show you. So I walk over there, and he said, here's a book outline. What do you think? So out of that would come this book here, Great Commission Companies. I'll just pass it around. And it came out in '03 in time for Urbana. So that was the idea from IV Press there. So that's how I become involved in it. But my focus has been on the church planning side of it. Rob, on the other hand, introduce yourself and give us your background.
Thank you.
It's all on. So.
Good morning. My name is Rob Tribken. I'm very happy to be here. I've been a business person and an entrepreneur for my whole adult life, longer than I've been a Christian. I've always had a high view of business as the generator of wealth creation, of a way out of poverty, and as generally beneficial for society. I say business and free markets, especially in the context of an adequate moral and cultural and legal framework. When I became a Christian 10 to 12 years ago, I went through a growing process. I ended up becoming very interested in finding ways to help people connect their faith and their work in business. In my view, we need to do a better job of affirming the importance and the value from a theological point of view of so-called secular vocations like business. And so I developed a small group curriculum, which we've had seven groups go through, called Transforming Work, which works very hard at trying to affirm people's secular vocations. And that's been useful. I've gotten involved in business as mission through Partners Worldwide in particular, where we try to help people in developing countries build businesses and find pathways out of poverty. And then recently I've begun something I call the Center for Faith and Enterprise. If you're interested, it's www.faithandenterprise.org. The purpose of which is to help people, to promote the idea of business as an important calling, and to promote the role of faith, markets, and business vocations for human well-being. And that's what I've been working on. And I think that's a pretty good introduction. Should I?
Let's find out what they want to know about the topic today.
Okay. And there are several things we can talk about, several directions we can go. And what we'd like to know is, what's your interest? What direction would you like to see us take the conversation? So, should we start over on this side?
Worth
And you think of business as mission, as a vehicle for evangelism primarily?
Yeah, I mean, that's really my focus.
Okay.
You know, I'm all about the Great Commission. I want to see disciples of all nations. And so how does that fit into
Okay. Thank you. Okay. You get 2 votes.
We own a business too, and so
Good.
we just like to learn more about the opportunities to maybe bring business across other countries. How can we also have a heart and mission, but we're business people.
Mhm.
Like you, I think, from a young age, always our passion. So
Yeah.
we'd like to, instead of just focusing in on just our business and our life, we also have a heart for missions across the globe, so we'd like to see if there's opportunities we would serve.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I would like to learn more about how to really integrate our faith into our careers and how to do that in any field.
Good. Thank you. Larry, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'm mostly concerned about, and when you began your speech, you mentioned the fact that when you became a Christian, you were interested in taking people out of poverty, teaching them the word, leading them to Christ, but at the same time, teaching them how to support themselves. And I think that's a big part of it, that when a business can interact with people, that a society, that say if I went out on mission, and I was sent to a society that was the epitome of decadence, decay, and morality, and immorality. But, you go over there and you start teaching the word, and you lead the people to Christ, now what? I mean, how do you kind of like bring the faith and take them out of poverty at the same time?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Over on this side? Okay, that's fair.
I think my interest is, I have a business that's a consulting business. It's been in business since 2001. And we started out, we kind of made a value of the company to give out of the business. And so it was just a contributing, factor to a number of different organizations. And over time, I think what I've become more interested in is there a way to become more hands-on? We want our lives to be a platform. We want the business to be a platform for proclaiming Christ with our lives, just in the way that we do business. But I'm also interested in how do are there practical ways to become more actively engaged? I thought about microfinancing. I thought about, where you feel like you're really contributing specifically to helping to solve some particular issues. So just kind of, I'm probably like Cynthia, just taking it in, but that in general is my
Okay,
my area of
thank you.
interest.
What kind of consulting do you do?
Business strategy.
Strategy?
Market strategies all around the customer issues.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm really interested in finding out more, I guess, as far as nonprofit versus, profitable, or kind of that more missional standpoint for
Yeah.
business. Example would be like kind of a Tom Shoe model of how business is done, just giving something back, but yet it's a profitable business. The greater mission and purpose behind it. So maybe just the balance between those two, and more of kind of like the nonprofit aspects of business as mission, and those kind of things.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay,
Seeking some strategies, ways to do.
hey, thank you.
I'm a retired corporate guy, not much of an entrepreneur, I guess, but I do teach, and my wife teaches here at Biola. A lot of students desire to go into ministry overseas, and many of them end up working, and are interested in knowing how they can be effective at ministering while working, in the world. I do have some who have an entrepreneurial interest, and I don't think we really have the capabilities of training those skills and interests, and I'd be interested in avenues for building skills and opportunities for people who have a desire to be entrepreneurs overseas or here.
Okay, thank you.
hardware, technology. And God called us to northwest Kenya. We've been out there planting churches for about 15 years. And I've seen a lot of bad band models and a few good ones. And so I just kind of wanted to hear a little bit from you guys.
I do a lot of work in Uganda, by the way.
Okay.
Just across the way.
Likewise, we've been working up in northern Kenya and actually implemented some initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested to hear from you guys how it is that you connect the business aspects into the local church, because we've seen that as a real gap in a lot of BAM initiatives. And what ends up happening is the focus becomes then on poverty alleviation. And what you end up doing is you have a lot of people who are wealthier, but they're still lost without the gospel. And there's been a real shift, I think, in missions away from centering that connection into where people then, yes, we want to be concerned about people's conditions and issues that they're struggling with, but often it doesn't get connected into local church so that they're supported and that takes place.
Yes.
So I'm interested to hear from you. Have you dealt with that, and how have you dealt with some of those things?
Okay. Tom, could I make two editorial comments? Maybe it might help get the conversation going. It sounds like a good group, so let me make those, and then I'll step aside.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Excuse me, I just had to ask you, since you did work in, you were doing work in Uganda, would you know Marisha Johnson? She got married. But,
No, I don't. Is she from Uganda?
No, she's from here, and she graduated in 2000, and she started a bunch of orphanages for HIV positive kids. I thought you might have.
No, but I think I'd like her contact information after the meeting. Thank you. I'd like to make a couple of editorial comments, I guess, first of all. Most of us in here are involved in business in one way or another. As I've conducted discussion groups with business people around the issue of faith, I've been struck by how difficult it is for people to see the value of their work from a faith perspective. Okay? In the very first group I conducted, I spent some time as a guest moderator for various groups. Very first group I conducted, one fellow said, I asked the group, tell me about the value of your business. What makes it important? And one fellow said, I'm grateful for my business. It supports my family and lets me provide jobs to my employees. But sometimes I worry that maybe I should quit and do something that serves the Lord. Maybe I should quit and do something that serves the Lord. Can you hear what he's saying about his work? Now, I don't want to give you any information. I don't want to break your confidence, but I can tell you his work is valuable. His business is valuable. His business does a lot for people, but he didn't see it in theological terms. And that's a repeated experience. Okay? I can ask people, tell me about the value of your work. I like asking that question. And I'm likely to hear about helping an employee in a time of trouble, about trying to set a good moral example, maybe about trying to share the gospel at the right moment, okay? All of which is important. But I almost never hear about the value of the work itself, okay? About the value of the goods and services the person is producing and spending a lot of energy to produce. Almost never hear about that. The insurance agent is not likely to tell me that his work helps buffer families from catastrophe. Okay? The event organizer is not likely to say that his work helps people build memories and build relationships and brings people together. Okay? The auto mechanic is not likely to tell me that he's helping to provide low-cost transportation for people so they can get to their jobs and pick up their kids. Okay? Now, my theory is that if it was a purely secular conversation, okay, purely secular, people would have a much easier time telling me about the importance of what they're doing and what it was doing for other people. Okay? That, I think, is a big problem for the church. I don't think that we do a good enough job affirming the work that people are doing. And when we do affirm it, it's more likely to be in terms of their work as a platform for doing things the church wants them to do. It's not likely to be about the goods and services. It's about an opportunity for evangelism or for demonstrating the Christian lifestyle, something like that, all of which is good. But it's not likely to concern the goods and services that they're actually devoting their energies to produce. Okay? That's one thing I think is important to keep in mind. Another thing I'd add is that when we talk about faith and about Christian community, and I'm borrowing from Michael Novak here, business is, when you think about it, is really a community building process usually. Successful businesses, and I think most of you know this, successful businesses are almost always built on highly effective collaborative relationships. Okay? The collaboration is usually the key to people getting things done and producing value and making businesses. Okay? And we tend to forget that. We talk all the time about competition and about dog-eat-dog kinds of stuff. But it's really the collaboration that really drives success in a business. And businesses around the world are building community around mutual benefit, which I think is important to keep in mind. It's not as individualistic and atomistic as sometimes we like to talk. And we business people, by the way, are kind of our worst enemies. I mean, we talk a good game about it being dog eat dog and a cruel world and all that, about the bottom line being so important. But in fact, we work really hard at trying to build collaboration and community as we get things done. George Gilder got in trouble a number of years ago when he was writing on enterprise. He referred to successful businesses as being altruistic, and people objected to that, and it became controversial. But the point he was making, aside, the wording may have been off-putting, but the point he was making was that successful business people are usually other-directed. Okay, they're looking for what their customers want. They're looking for how to work with suppliers. They're looking for what their employees want. It's an other-directed process, and we lose sight of that. And the reason why I tell you that is sometimes we think in terms of a dichotomy between business and Christian faith, but there's much more of a basis for a natural connection than I think we remember. Okay? That, I think, applies in our own businesses, and when we think about doing things outside or going away from our businesses to do something else, I think it applies there. If you start a business in Kenya or in Uganda, it's a lot of the same kind of issues. And it's also, I talk about businesses being a value-producing enterprise. Well, that's how businesses produce value. You figure out what somebody needs. You figure out a way to make it. You know that better than I do, probably. You figure out a way to deliver it in a creative way, and in a way that costs less. You're creating more value than you're spending, so you can make a profit at it. And that's how we create value. And that's why it's the pathway out of poverty for poor people. It's business and markets that lead to people getting out of poverty. Charity ameliorates poverty, okay? But it rarely really helps somebody actually move beyond it. It's really the market activity that allows people to actually break out of poverty. I think that's enough editorializing for me. Why don't we open it up to discussion? Comments? Opinions? I should have given you some warning.
I want to know what the goal is with business as mission, because what I keep hearing is that we're looking at poverty alleviation.
Yeah.
And I think that there's somehow sometimes, like you were talking about, that disconnect even in America between business and church. Business, we go 5 days a week and we work here, and we go to church on Sunday, and there's that disconnect. And I think part of that comes back to we don't see our role individually as go ye into all the world. That applies to the American sitting in church and going to work 5 days a week, just as much as it does the mission guy overseas over there. So there's this disconnect between what is our focus? Is it poverty alleviation, or is it bringing the gospel so that people can hear and see good news? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that kind of goes to your question too, I think, about, yeah.
Yeah, we all have to make money, and we all have to feed each other, whether we're here in America or we're in a hut in Africa. And so how do you come helping a community with some of that, but also connecting all of that to the gospel and to the local church?
Let me answer that. I'd like to do it first by defining business's mission as I see it, and then coming around to how it answers your question. There are a number of different approaches to business as mission. And I think there are different definitions to business, the expression business as mission that's applied to, people talk of it as a movement. I think it is. Okay. I see it like this. I think business as mission combines there are two aspects to it. One is its business as business. Okay? And by business, to be clear, I mean the production and distribution of products and services, worthwhile products and services, that can be sold or exchanged for a profit. Okay? That's different than using political or family or cultural connections, influence on the government to try to get control over a resource that you charge people rent for. Okay? It's different than those kinds of things. It's different than trying to use your cultural status to maintain your position, your economic position in the society. Okay? When I talk about business, I mean the production of goods and services that people actually want and that you can make a profit doing. Okay? That's how we produce value. So business's mission includes business as business. The mission part, it has to be a response to a call from God, in my view. Okay? We're all called to, I think, to participate in the mission of God. Okay? That's the second aspect. So it's business, but it's also responding to the call to participate in God's mission in the world. Okay? Now, some people say, well, it should include church planning. Okay? It should include maybe some form of charity work or maybe bathed in religious language. Okay? In my view, it can include those things. Doesn't have to. Your call may be to poverty alleviation. Now, to get to your question, the call you feel from God may be for poverty alleviation through business. Okay? In which case, that's your business. That's business as a mission for you. Your call may be evangelism, and you may be called to do that through business. And I would consider that business as a mission as well, as long as you're talking about real business. But so it depends on how you're called. And I think the key thing is, how are you called by God? If you're called by God to evangelism, that's valid. If you're called to poverty alleviation, that's valid.
It just seems to me that whatever we're called to, that we should be trying to live that out within the context of our faith. And what I mean by that is that I do think that, and I don't know if this is what Mindy is getting at, that I do think that we're all called to be witnesses through our lives, through our words,
Mm-hmm.
in every way. Like
Yep.
Augustine said, like at all times preach Christ, and if necessary, use words. So or something like that, probably paraphrase.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that even if we're called to poverty alleviation, we can still do it within the context of, as we do that work, that we're always looking for a way to preach Christ
Yeah.
Through our lives, again, through our words, and that we are looking for a way to tell other people the good news of the gospel and bring them to Christ where possible. So, I mean, whenever possible, clearly that's a choice of each person. But it just feels like, to me, we can whatever the end goal we're doing, providing business, services or whatever, but we should always be looking for that way to be a witness in the context of our work.
Yeah, be a witness, yeah. We're called to be and to do. Yeah. Now, when I mentioned evangelism and poverty alleviation, I would also say that we can be called to something that doesn't sound quite so religious, if you will, like helping build community within your businesses, like providing good low-cost services, like bringing an innovation to market. Okay? It seems to me those can all be worthwhile callings too. It doesn't have to be something that's bathed in religious language, or it doesn't have to be something the church normally gets involved with, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Other comments? I'm doing too much talking. I should be doing more listening. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to hit all these questions. I'm trying to hit a bunch of them here at one time here, okay? So in the Great Commission Company book, that one there that you took a look at, one of the things we try to do is look at, you have Christians can have a business that's just as secular as anybody else's out there. There's no different. You wouldn't know it was a Christian business even though it's run by a Christian. And then you have a good Christian company who's run by great values. And you'll see on the bottoms of your cups at certain restaurants, right? John 3:16, and and values, and they try to run their business like that. What we try to do is go the next step above that and move it into out of marketplace ministries, which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's a great start. And that's, I think, where some of you are at this point. how do you make your Christian company a really great Christian company and run the values so the people that you deal with inside and outside see those values. And that's marketplace ministry. That's a tag that's kind of given to that area. Then you move on beyond that into business's mission. And as I've been talking about, there's multiple ways of looking at that. And we looked at it basically from two perspectives and tried to outline. And when you try to graph that thing, the type of Great Commission companies that are out there, it's God thing. So you can't, we chart it, but you can't because and we did that on purpose just to show you can't chart it. There's so much variety out there. And there has to be so much variety out there because God's very creative and it's a very creative world. So then we moved into Great Commission companies. We looked at two basic aspects that you could do it from. You could use it in a facilitator way or you could use it in a pioneer way. And I'm going to give you a pioneer example because I'm going to convince this guy over here, our skeptic in the audience. And a facilitator way, I'm going to use that. I'll give you two little case studies out of that. One of the facilitator's ways was Pure Vita Coffee out of Seattle. You know, are you familiar with that one? And we used that as one of our case studies. And both of them are Harvard MBA guys, went through their whole program together. One goes down to Costa Rica to start some more social work with some church planning involved with it. And then the other one who had his background, actually, he made his money in Microsoft during those heydays, and then went and started Pure Vita. And but what was interesting, how the background, how that got started, was that every year they would meet together, and how's it going, what's happening. And one day the guy from Costa Rica brings a packet of coffee and gives it to him. And it was like there was no response. Don't you like my gift? Yeah, I like you. And out comes the napkin. All good business models start on a napkin, right? And then they started, how could we import this using fair trade and getting it up here? And then I put it all over the place and we could ride the Starbucks wave and make some money. And because at that point he was very self-sufficient, okay, 100% could go back into the business at that point. So that's how Pure Vita got started. And actually, I came back after our time up there in Seattle. So Dr. Cook was our president at that point, and went and talked to him. How come we can't use Pure Vita here? At least every time they buy a cup of coffee, some of that money is going back into mission somewhere. Anyway, we got it at one of the things. They couldn't do it because of the, we got it in one of our little restaurants over here. Anyway, that's a facilitator model. So he uses the coffee as a means then to support various mission groups in different parts of the world. And he's located in the U.S. Of course, you can have those located outside the U.S. as well, doing the same thing. So it was nothing more than just to use funding to support various ministries around the deal. Okay, we just redid Great Commission companies. It'll come out, the new version will come out next year. Here's something that happened during that time. It's always fun to track these things as well, right? Okay. Pure Vita, whoever their board is now, has decided that they only want funding going to now into community development areas. Nothing to do with any church planning, any type of ministries of those natures. That's out. So they changed, and that was a change. We don't particularly like that change, but that's what happened. Now let me take you to China, okay? And this is my favorite. My favorite one. We tromped around China a little bit looking at a number of Great Commission companies over there. Not just China, but this one comes out of China. And small business, 320 people at that time, probably $3 million a year was annual gross and so forth. Got into Tiffany glass, all those Tiffany lights you guys buy at Christmas time around here, you know. They're all made in that little shop there. And I went with him, just walked the floor with him every day when I was there and listened to him. And you know, it would go from English to Mandarin. So once it went to Mandarin, I was totally out. But anyway, I could catch up later on when I find that, you know, I had a little time with him. But anyway, we were walking around, and he's looking at this piece of glass that this guy's making, this light that he's making. And it's probably worth a couple $100 at this point. He picks it up, and he throws it on the floor, smashes it. Okay, this is, 320 people. Everybody hears this, okay? Everybody hears this. And I should say, it was a very high ceiling, lots of light, lots of breeze. It's a beautiful place to work in. And I'm looking, whoa, what did he just do? And I found out later he had talked to this guy before, and he told him, you know what? China was once known for silk around the world, and they had a great reputation for what they made. We don't produce junk. We want to get that reputation back again. He'd already talked to him once before. I didn't know that, of course. And so when he did it the second time, he not only broke it, but he was fined, and I don't know, there was something else that happened that went with it. But everybody in that 320 people all heard that conversation. And now they're saying, look, we are going to produce quality material out of this shop. And if you're not going to do it, then you're going to pay a cost for it. You're going to pay a cost for it. And he paid a cost for it by just destroying $200 worth of work, So he demonstrated through what he did. That evening, he said, we're going to meet with the leaders of the house churches. I thought, oh, good. Okay, after that. So I'm waiting in his office at 5 o'clock, and these people start walking in, young people, lots of young people. Well, okay, we must all be going to go somewhere and meet them. Oh, these were the house church leaders. Wow, okay. The house church leaders. Their HR guy was responsible for not only everybody within that organization, on the campus itself. He was responsible to go to every one of their houses and meet with their families to know what are your needs and is there something we can do as a business to help you meet those needs. And of course there's a lot of medical needs that have to be there, and finances were provided to do that. Okay, here's another thing that came up on the floor. Not while I was there, but a story that was told to me. He was just walking around as he always does, and he's behind, and the workers it's like, I should be behind you, like that. And so these girls are talking, and they don't know he's behind them. One of them says, he's the best boss in Asia. Well, okay, that's pretty good, And somebody says, he's the best boss in Asia. And so he just walked up to, excuse me, what do you mean by that? Well, don't you remember when my son was sick, you gave us some money so we could take him to the hospital? Okay. Well, that's the kind of stuff that gets rippled out, right? That's where all these house churches started to get going. And then they do the training. But it comes from he himself did not do it as an American, but he had people working within his organization to do it. That's where the teamwork comes in. Who's your gifted people? Because not all business people are gifted in doing the ministry side of it and really good to take it all to the level of church multiplication. But we can do that if you do that with a team. We train our people here to do that, to plant churches, to start church planting movements. So if you hook those up with a team, you can do that. You don't have to have all those gifts, because we have too many people, business people, trying to do the ministry side and are not good at it, and too many ministry people doing business who are terrible at it, okay? This is where the teamwork, this is the body of Christ needs to come together and work and try to do it and put it together. Okay, that's good enough. That. Are you convinced yet? Getting there, it's coming.
It's good. It's a process.
Oh, yeah.
More comments?
Just one quick question. You talked about the different ways of, and then examples. You gave this facilitator way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What was the other way, the China way?
Okay, the China was a pioneer way. Yeah, where they went out and they started planting churches, and of course, it did through house churches. And so that's a pioneer, going out and setting it up and starting it from scratch. There's no church to work with, no church to tie to. You just go out and you start them. I should say too, one of his goals, and he put in for the the TGI Friday deal contract. He tried to get that back when they were going to redo all their glass, because it all looked kind of old back then. And he said, if I get this contract, here's the 3 areas we're going to in 50-mile places, just distances apart. We will start a school, we will start a business, and out of that, of course, will come the house churches that'll do that. And we'll do that. They had places picked out. He didn't get the contract. But that was the goal. If they made the money, that's where the next. Now they have another one that's out there, 50 miles from this particular place. But it didn't come through the Tiffany or through the TGI Friday deal. So that's your difference. Facilitator, just helping it. And these are all legitimate. It's just, your calling again. Where does God call you, and what are your gifts and skills, and how big a team can you build that have all these gifts and skills and so forth.
When you're in Kenya, you probably see lots of opportunities for economic development, I would think. Products that are needed, particularly in agriculture, I think. And I think those are all fertile fields for business as mission. I mean, people need food. They need houses. And it's the job of businesses to produce food and houses and clothing, obviously. So, you had a question.
Well, I just was going to say, I think, based on what you guys are saying, I completely agree in that. The way I see it, too, as a businessman, and it resulted in my own self, is because as you grow up, you're not taught really how essential it is you understand how you're created, what God has given you.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an artist, as a musician, as anybody with their gifts that God's given, use them for the glory of God, it's exactly the same for a businessman.
Yeah.
For a businessman to say, I'm going to quit being a businessman because profit's involved in it, that's where the big buzzword is.
Yeah.
Profit. Wait a minute. Because profit, then it couldn't be as noble as an artist. It couldn't be as noble as, a musician.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it for whatever reason. I don't know. We just condone it. If you make a profit, therefore that buzzword now, we as society, we put a box around our head and said, therefore there's something maybe not as noble about it.
Mm-hmm.
But how foolish when you think about it.
Yeah.
You're not a businessman if you don't make a profit. I tell my own staff, guys, we got to look at ourselves. If we have good business or not. If we can't make a profit, let's just quit. We could either call ourselves a non-profit organization and identify it. We're not business people.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're business people, we'll make a profit. That identifies you whether you're gifted with business or not. A musician probably doesn't know how to make a profit in most cases. A
Yeah.
businessman will. So when you take your skills, pulling people together, taking an idea and putting it into action, that's a different gift of God. No better, no worse than anybody else. So now when you say, identify, I'm a businessman or a woman, now where do I lie with God and I surrender this to Him? He is going to come in all kinds of different forms and fashions, I think. It's one, like your concerns are we really connecting people with God? Well, you're going to have one businessman that has no clue how to do that. But he does know how to run a business with a profit. But his heart open to God will team up with people that do.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Good
then
point.
it brings together a team saying all bonded with the Holy Spirit. You got the artist, the musician, the businessman, and we're all coming together in God's name for His glory. And me as a businessman, I'm not going to compete with that guy who can bring the gospel in a way that I'll stumble and I'll say it in a businessman's way and overpower maybe, which works in business, but maybe not in presenting the gospel in a certain way that this guy who's a teacher, and I'm not, can teach the gospel in a way that's clearer than I can. So we come together humbly, not thinking a businessman's any better, or a musician's any better, or anybody's any better. But I think one thing we can't forget, if you don't make a profit, you're not a businessman. If you think profit's bad, you better reconsider maybe your ideology. The ideology of that, is that really true? Because I think it's good to make a profit, but it's what do you do with those profits? It's like saying money's bad.
Yeah.
Money's not bad. It's what you do with money is really bad or good.
I think it's
So that's where we have to clear that up. I think my own mind. I always have to tell myself this.
Good.
I notice when I hear people talk about business as mission and explore this area, I usually hear of it in terms of the need to spread the gospel and full redemption side of the equation. And something that I've noticed and I've experimented with a little bit is, even before that, is to look at the very first command in Scripture to mankind, even before the fall and the need for redemption, is to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it and have dominion. And when you explore the concept of what God had in mind with dominion and that initial role that he had for us, of extending his rule in the earth, and extending the impact of his kingdom, and to have dominion as a steward over that which he's entrusted to us, then that I see a parallel between what businesses do in generating profit, or a return on investment, as being similar to what an artist does in creating something beautiful.
Yes.
In that it's part of that concept of being fruitful and multiplying and exercising dominion, and being creative and using that image of God that's in us and participating in his creative act to make something of value that wasn't there before. Now, we can't create out of nothing like he did, but we can create out of something that he's entrusted to us, the raw materials of the earth. And that creative process is, in effect, wrapped up in what the definition of business is that you gave us. And also involved in that is this calling and the original intent of the role of man in relationship with God to participate with him in that creative act. And one thing that I've noticed and experimented with people in organizations I've worked in, as a supervisor, I look for ways to build that community that you were talking about by trying to find out what a person's individual calling is, find out where they're gifted and where their passion is, and see if I can align their work assignments with their gifts and their passion. And it is amazing the transformation that takes place in individuals' lives, even among the non-Christians. When you're able to do that and to demonstrate that I care about them enough to seek that out, and then to try to make that happen, and jointly with them, if they don't know it, explore with them to try to find out where they're uniquely created by God, what their talents are, and what their passions are. And even if I can only find 10% of their assignments that fit in that area, but be purposeful about that and tell them that's what I'm doing, I found that it totally changes their outlook on life, and that they get a little spark and they have a little taste of what it's like to be living in a kingdom environment under God, exercising dominion and being creative in that way.
Yes.
And it so changes their attitude about their work and their attitude about their own life and their interest in things, that all of a sudden now, once they've tasted that, they're more open to spiritual things and the sharing of the gospel. And then they start to be awakened to, yeah, isn't this beautiful, but there's problems with the world too, a la we need a savior, you know. And then you can start explaining things like that. The other thing that's happened when I've done that is that people are so surprised by anyone who would treat them that way, and by the joy that they experience in the outcome, that they are incredibly loyal as an employee. And I could ask them to do almost anything, and they're extremely motivated and committed now to me as a supervisor and to the organization and their work, because they're experiencing God's blessing in their work in the way that they've been uniquely gifted. And as a result of that, then there's opportunities to go beyond that and empower the individual to, if they are a Christian, to use their gifts and have them flower and flourish in all kinds of ways that expand the kingdom that I could never dream of. Or if they're not a Christian, to be drawn to the gospel and the church, and then eventually do that. And I've experienced cases where I've had that relationship with an individual, and then years later was able to say, just as a suggestion or a strong recommendation, you know, gee, there's some event coming up, like, oh, I happen to notice that Biola is sponsoring an apologetics seminar in your church, in your community, or at a church nearby. You and your family need to go to this to catch a glimpse of some things that I know you haven't been exposed to yet. And I'm thinking of a couple people in particular who went and attended, and that opened up their eyes to other things. All that came out of years ago, encouraging them to use their gifts the way God had gifted them in the business environment.
And that's so important what you're doing. And you remember I talked about being other directed in business and how it fits in with it's consistent and it helps build the relationships that lead to successful business. I think the fact that you were other directed, I think, is a perfect example of that. It's also an example of people being able to use their gifts, and people want to be able to use their gifts and produce and have something to exchange with others, I think. And I think that's
you
perfect.
You were talking about different levels of business as mission, and I
Yeah.
see that as yet another level.
Oh, I do too, yeah.
Of getting back even before the fall of the need for redemption and using business as a vehicle to share the gospel, but using business as a vehicle to help people catch a glimpse of what God's original intent purpose was for their lives, which then will lead them to the story of the need for a Redeemer and being open to the gospel message.
Yeah, and it's gosh, it helps people on their journey. It helps them. It helps in a in a theological sense, but it also helps in a business sense. You can see the way things can fit together so well.
And those kind of people, when you're able to do that and match them up that way with their gifts, they're incredibly productive.
Yeah, yeah.
Productive.
Yeah, and that's the way we should be living, I think, in my view. Other comments? Yeah.
I was just going to say that there seems to me to be a huge difference of challenge between rural poverty, in a disconnected, underdeveloped world, and the globalized Asian areas of the big cities where there's just a whole different kind of dynamic in terms of competition and challenges that
An opportunity.
An opportunity. My brother is a seminary professor, and he travels every few months to Asia to hold week-long seminary classes for the underground church in Rangoon, Hanoi, Saigon. Asian cities that are very connected now, with the global economy, but where the Christian church is really economically disadvantaged because they either aren't part of the ruling class or the dominant political party that runs and makes economic decisions. And he's impressed with how what great sacrifices these people are making to educate their young and to split up their families, just in order to create the opportunity for them to economically survive in the decades to come. It just seems that there's something that can be done to help the church, in the cities, become more economically self-supporting and viable, because they're going through great hardships to do this. And they're all, they're very entrepreneurial and very hardworking.
Yeah.
But it impresses me, how much sacrifice they go through to send their kids to the U.S. or to this or that school, and how families aren't able to afford to live together and support one another. It's a very challenging economic environment in the big cities for the underground church.
Yeah, yeah. I think people move to the cities for the opportunity, but it does bring a lot of social cost and pain with it.
There is opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for Christians, sometimes not so much because of their status as a minority and as not belonging with a political power group that controls these things.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, sure.
One of my concerns. For example, with alleviating poverty, it seems to me that there are still so many billions of people who are at the level where all they need is micro enterprise projects, microfinancing. It might be a widow that just needs a sewing machine. It might be a man that just needs a toolkit so he can farm. A family that just needs a pair of chickens. So when it's at that low level of poverty, it doesn't seem like it necessarily takes an MBA, to establish those type of projects. So one of my concerns is that for, say, an American businessman or woman, they could be here making millions of dollars, and
We hope. Or we'd like to, I should say.
Yeah, they could give a tremendous amount of money towards those projects because there's so many organizations that are already doing that type of stuff. That it's very likely that they might be more valuable to the kingdom of God, staying in a place where they can earn as much money as possible and just doing the right thing with the money, like you said, instead of rushing to the mission field because they hear the need and getting their hands dirty and being really the hands and feet of the ministry. On the one hand, they're missing out on making all those millions of dollars, and then over here, it takes some time to establish whatever business it is that you're trying to start up on the mission field. It takes time and so forth. When there's already organizations doing that, so that's on the poverty side. And then if you're interested in more of the Great Commission, sharing the gospel side, another thing that I think of is, again, you could be here making your millions of dollars, and you could support, for instance, you could support native missionaries, national missionaries for only like $2,000 a year, and even if you have just a modest income here in the United States, you could basically send out a small army of trained local missionaries to reach their own people. So I guess kind of my concern is that it seems like 95% of the time, or the majority of the time when we talk about business as missions, we hear it as there's such a need on the mission field in the mission field countries, and you have a skill in business, so can you go help out in these countries? Whereas, a lot of times, perhaps their greatest need and where they are most valuable to the kingdom of God could be in a place where they're just making the most money and just doing the right thing with that money, which is what I see as business as missions as well. But it seems like the majority of the time when we're talking about it, it's go to these mission field countries. So
It's a very good question and a very difficult one. It's something I've been struggling with. I'm not in that league that you're talking about in terms of size of business here, but it's a conundrum. If somebody's running a company here and producing, say, several $100 million worth of food or housing or clothing or cell phones, whatever, that's a very productive place for them to be, and you'd like them to focus on that. In terms of just sending money, I guess in my view, and what I've seen in things I've been involved with, what poor countries, what developing countries need is really business formation, okay? And that's not necessarily just a capital issue. You need entrepreneurs, you need people who can start businesses. Sometimes the capital plays a role, but you really want to identify the entrepreneurs, particularly the indigenous entrepreneurs who can start a business that have the potential to grow something really, really nice. And that's part of what we do. I'm involved with Partners Worldwide, and that for that reason. I mean, we try to work with the people that the high potential entrepreneurs. But it's a tough problem, and it's tough, and it's tough partly because if that person does go over to a developing country, it takes a while. There's a period of learning and exploration too, where things don't feel very productive until you kind of figure out what's where the opportunities are. But I think I think you've identified an issue that's critical and hard to resolve. The business formation really is the key in a lot of these situations. The person that starts a business and hires a couple hundred people, and then that spreads to the families, and then they got suppliers, and the quality of the products is improving, and that's so important. But it's hard to do that just by sending money. I mean, you got to take some time and help people, or identify the people there who can make it happen.
That's part of the thing native, the local entrepreneurs, if there's somehow to connect with them and develop a relationship and maintain accountability and to work with them, maybe you don't even have to go to do it yourself.
Yeah, maybe. And let me just say also that when we talk about developing countries, at least my experience is there's plenty of smart people there. There's plenty of there's skill and talent and that sort of thing. I'm against doing it, thinking we have to do it for them. There's plenty of talent there. It's just trying to figure out what's that little piece of help we can provide while they do the heavy lifting. Well, that's the way I see it, at least. Yeah.
May I ask a question maybe
Sure.
about, is it partners?
Partners worldwide, yes.
I worked for a couple of multinational companies in my business career. We would be starting up, even just small marketing offices in countries all over the
Mhm.
world. And it's so difficult just to deal with licensing and tax and residency and, just the basic business issues.
Yeah.
And the ongoing, business issues in terms of regulation, tax, licensing are very complex. We would go to the big public accounting national
Yeah.
consulting firms, and buy expertise, and we have regional law firms and what have you. What kind of resources are available, just to help people explore the initial steps of perhaps setting up the first stage of a business overseas?
Yeah.
Can partners help in that?
Yes, they can. In the case of Uganda, for example, the country I'm most familiar with, the same thing's true for Kenya. We've got in-country managers there who can help sort through some of that process. It's not hard to hire an attorney either who can sort through things, depending on the country. Some countries are harder than others. Some businesses are more difficult than others, I would imagine. Well, yeah, let's talk to me afterwards. I think I can tell you some places to turn. That'd be good. What kind of business are you? Is it a particular type of business you're interested in? We'll talk later. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question just regarding really the strategy I think that's needed now within churches in the U.S. setting out missionaries or those that are actually called. Let's say a couple is called to go serve in a particular country where maybe the resources aren't as abundant. What would you say is one of those valuable things that, using a couple for example, could do if it's maybe a particular product that they would be able to bring, or more so an existing product that is in another country that they could actually go and either be a part of that business and kind of just work in that setting, where then they're able to kind of build relationships and start sharing the gospel, and that's kind of like the main focus is to go share the gospel, but doing it through business. Maybe just some strategies or things that would be really helpful.
I would say that business is very context specific, okay? Especially when you're thinking internationally. Okay, some things will work, some things will be good business some places, and not others. I think the first thing to do is go visit the country and try to get a sense for what's going on. I think if you're working with other people, I'd want to be thinking through what kinds of skill sets do you have. Is there particular business expertise, or is it more general? Accountants bring a very specific kind of a capability. Bankers can help with the finance agencies. Food processors. We organized a 2-day seminar in Kampala last June for small-scale food processors, with the idea of teaching about food safety and some of the things that will help them sell to bigger customers. We did it with the help of in-country experts too. We had people from the university help us. So there's plenty of expertise there. We just kind of helped pull the thing together. I would look around. I'd look around. I do a lot of listening, a lot of looking, and like you would if you started a business here. I mean, you want to spend a lot of time understanding the environment and really looking for where the need is. What can you do for people that's significant enough that you can make a business out of it. that'd be my approach. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Sure, sure.
I agree with what you say. I think it's really important to have the context. I think it's also important to realize what your goals are. You know,
Yeah.
you have to ask that question,
Yeah.
why? Why would you go there? Why are you doing this? You know, it might come back to your question, am I doing it for an avenue into evangelism? Am I looking at poverty alleviation? Why would you do that? But I think along with all of that, we really need to pray. If our
Yeah.
goal is, ultimately,
Absolutely.
our goal is to spread the gospel, right? Through all this. That's why we're talking as business as missions. If our goal is to have that relationship with somebody, to have the opportunity to share my life of Christ with them, then it's a spiritual issue that we're talking about. And that takes prayer. And the
Yeah.
only way we're going to be successful truly in a God-like way, successful in any of these avenues, is to really take our lead from Him. And that is going to be through prayer. And God will guide. I believe God will guide.
Yeah, I do too. And I'm so glad you mentioned prayer. I would have felt badly had it not come up. I should have said something. Yeah, I think that's the thing about business mission. You have to listen to the call of God. I mean, that's what drives it. You know, we may get it wrong. We may not discern properly. You know, who knows? But it's our job to listen and do the best we can.
And the second part of that question would be just in order for missionaries to be more self-sufficient, self-supporting,
Okay.
so they're not specifically having to continue remaining using particular funds from a church. They want to go with that support, but then the end result saying we're now self-supported and able to do this.
Okay.
That type of aspect through
Yeah.
Going to serve. So much more of a self-supported role.
Yeah.
Which would be part of the goal to eventually do that. So
The-
maybe just strategic ways to set that up, to know
Yep.
how long that might take or those types of things.
Yeah, the one caution I think I'd offer is that I think it's valid to be self-supporting. Okay. I think that's valid. The one thing to watch out for is it can be really difficult to set up a successful business. And sometimes you hear it from an NGO, for example, or, charity. Well, we want to set up a business so it'll support our charitable activities. It's not that easy. You know, it's just not that easy. I mean, and starting a business takes a certain amount of focus. And that's not to disagree with what you're saying about being self-supporting. I mean, I think that's valid. It's just you got to be a little careful that if you haven't been in business before, it's not like you just start something and money comes. You set up a money machine and it funds everything. Yeah, you know that. So, yeah.
Just kind of adding to what he was saying about the money, I think that's definitely a valid point of if you're in a successful business to use the money to write the check. But I think also there's some that are, sometimes it's easier to write the check. And there's so much more to offer than money. I think that's where we get the hang up, business equals money. And like this gentleman said about, what about all of the insight and the knowledge of being able to go and even train people in these other countries? They've already got the skills, they've got the entrepreneurial spirit and heart, but they just maybe lack training. And so even just to go to give training and insight of managing people and giving people a glimpse of what God created them to be, and then now you're using that as a way to get people hooked as they catch that spark of, wow, I'm created for something and I want to know what that is, and it's almost addicting. They can't get enough. They want to know more. So I think just in offering training to these people in these other countries, you're not going there and doing it for them.
Mm-hmm.
You're just helping equip them. And
Yeah.
with that, you're also giving them spiritual insight and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And helping them, approaching the work from a more holistic point of view, really, and bringing themselves into it.
Which brings productivity, which brings profit.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what
By the way.
people really realize is when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Nothing's worse than going to church and the lady up there, the man up singing shouldn't be up there singing. You know, it's like it's probably a businessman. You know, and you just see dysfunction. You know, it's the same with businesses. You see businesses do the same thing. The guy that's the CFO, he shouldn't be doing that. You know, he should be doing maybe sanding in the back. You know, or something. But somehow politically, in power, and for whatever reasons, people are in the wrong positions. But that's what's the dynamics about really realizing what are you truly it's sanding, get back and sand humbly and be happy, love life, and that's what you're meant to do, and you do it to the glory of God. If it's to run the business, get on your hands and knees in humility and serve your employees. And it's kind of what you were saying. If we're not praying, if we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, none of this, what we're talking about today, even really matters, because here domestically, you're not living the way you should be anyways. You know, so it really comes down to why do we do it? Why are we going into missions? Is it to make more profit? Then it's just from immaturity. Maybe that's already based here domestically. But if it's truly to serve God, it's powerful, and it doesn't have to be in one package. What's great is God's so diverse. He's such an incredible artist. He doesn't have to do it in one way. He takes, I mean, and that's what humbles us too, is because I don't have all the answers. I need everyone else to help me because I don't know the answers. So I know a little bit though, and that little bit combined with the little someone else knows and someone else knows, we go as a team, and then we go, and the answer is in that, in the body of Christ all together. But it's exciting. There's not one approach. I think the approach McDonald's going into China and their success is a great way of one company doing it.
Yeah.
I also think the other businessmen that say that's not my model, I'm going to go and empower the local indigenous business guys. They're already there. They know their culture better than I do. And I'm going to teach them just the basic fundamentals maybe of setting structure in what your dream and visions are and putting those into action and making what you already know is good and what you already has success in your head. We'll put that into reality, and I'll teach you how to just take those steps. But I don't know your vision, and I don't know really your people. You do.
Yeah.
I'll just help you out in that little way.
Yeah.
And so it's all a bunch of different businessmen coming from different angles, attacking it from all different directions. And that's where God then is glorified. Because not one guy gets the glory anymore either. Everybody does this, and now it would be the thought of that. You know, everyone's going to get to glorify God by having their different angles on it.
Yep. That's what makes it a work of art. Tom?
We're done.
Closing comments?
I wanted to comment too. I think once you get out, actually you don't even have to get out of the West, but for sure once you get out of the West, they're not going to bifurcate between this is social and this is spiritual. It's all integrated. That's how they see it. And if you only go on the one side, they're going to wonder why you're not on the other side. No matter which side you're on, they're going to wonder which side, why aren't you on the other side as well. Good. Hopefully this is helpful for you. If you need anything else from Rob or myself, you can email us. Mine's just tom.steffen@biola.edu, same thing.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.